of people helping people led her to a new career opportunity in 2022 with the Division of Minority and Women-Owned Business Development, where she works to educate and support minority and women entrepreneurs in the certification process. She is a development educator, certified financial counselor, certified diversity, equity, and inclusion leader, and a Google certified project manager. So we have the very best, very appointed person with us to try and share some information. And the nice thing is we get to hear her presentation and then chat with her later in the day. She has an associate's degree in business administration from SUNY Broome, so she's from your own backyard, a bachelor's degree in human development from Binghamton University, go Binghamton, and casework toward her MBA from Excelsior College, and I love Excelsior College. Outside of work, Colleen volunteers her time with Park Ridgeville School Sports Youth Association and is a board member. She graduated from Shenango Valley High School, where our food is coming from the area, and she resides in Broome County with her husband and their 5 children. So not only is she a woman of one, she's a woman of many. So welcome, Colleen. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I'm so glad to be here with you all this morning. I'm going to go through the certification process for New York State MWBE certification. Just some touch points I'm gonna hit on is going to be the application, some of the pitfalls that people see, some of the whys on why we ask for certain things. So just to give you some clarity. Now, just for my own knowledge, how many of you are certified by New York State? Few of you. Okay. And I do know it was probably a long and daunting process. But the good news is, Article 15, we just celebrated the 35th year. There was a backlog from 1989 until the beginning of 2023. The backlog was eradicated by July 1st of 2023. So now all applications that are being submitted are processed within 120 days from your application submission. So once you hit that final submission, you've completed everything in the app. Within 120 days, you will be guaranteed a decision. So that's a really good thing because I know a lot of people were.
That is wow, you kicked this off really.
Yeah, a lot of people were really waited years before, years. Marshall can attest to that because he got right in my email box when I first started working for the division. So now we're right on top of it. And usually I can't make promises, but it's usually processed sooner than the 120 days. It depends on how fast you get information when we request additional things back to us. But that's good news. So diversity is the key to business success in New York State. And the Division of Minority and Women Business Development really are there to support all applicants, all MWBEs in their journey of being successful. So Article 15. So it was signed in July of 1988. And again, we just celebrated the 35 years of that, which is really good. New York often is a step ahead of many other states when it comes to giving some of these additional diversified opportunities. What does it do? It aims to promote employment and business opportunities for state contracts and minorities. It also just wants to make sure that there's a level playing field. And that's one of the things that I often stress to anybody that questions why it's important. Level playing field. As it was mentioned, I am a mom of 5. I have 3 boys and 2 girls. My just one more was triplets, so that's how we got to 5. But I often tell my sons, and my husband gets upset, but I'm like, you are privileged white boys. Like, so we need to knock it down. So they're gonna know that there are reasons why mom does the work she does. And that's important. Article 15 charges state agencies in establishing employment and business participation goals. So often when agencies are looking to get a contract, buy goods, do any sort of business, they have to do it with an MWBE or they get a waiver. My job as an analyst and our job in certification is to get more people certified. So no offense to those that may take offense to it. So more things can be distributed to minority and women-owned businesses instead of the traditional places where they are given. So we really are stressing those goals. Most agencies have a 30% goal that they have to achieve, a utilization goal, that they have to get 30% of that service or good from an MWBE. I know currently in Article 15, when it comes to utilization, there aren't some safeties in there for, let's say, the MWBE's bid is a little bit higher than someone else's. So I know they're working to help change that a little bit, because often when you have a state contract or there's a requirement, they want you to go with the lowest bid, and that MWBE bid isn't always the lowest. So I know that when it's getting reauthorized, that is one of the things that they're looking at. How can they add an incentive or give a 15% or whatever it is, kind of leeway, so more MWBEs are getting that utilization. That's not current, but I know that's something they are looking at as the reauthorization is coming up. And then Article 15 also authorized the creation of what we now call the Division of Minority and Women Business Development. So that's important. I have a job because of Article 15. Okay. So the Division of Minority and Women Business Development, we want to promote opportunities for everyone. We want to make sure that there's access. We want to make sure that businesses are just having great success within New York State. And not only do we want to prioritize New York State businesses, but we also want to make sure that MWBEs from anywhere are able to participate in our program as well. So the benefits of certification, the opportunities that it offers. So currently there's over 9,000 businesses on our registry, the directory you can look at to get different products, services, goods. However, they are organized by their NAICS code. So that's the code of how they're doing business, etc. That is how we organize things, and that's how we certify you under a NAICS code. When you have certification, your door is open to some additional funding opportunities, loan programs, etc. You can work with our business development team and they can help you get some of those. If you are New York State certified, often that helps you get some of your local grants and things that may be offered by a chamber or an EAC, etc. Additionally, on top of the loans and grants and all those things, you have access to our business development team that can help you with different opportunities, provide different information and resources. And their goal really is to help you be more successful. They're always offering different opportunities, from educating you on maybe some understanding of the process of getting a state contract to, we just had in Syracuse, we had an Opportunities Expo where we had different vendors, different state agencies, etc., where you come and network and there were different learning opportunities. I really enjoyed it. I learned about New York State is becoming a very important aspect in the film industry. If you didn't know that, very interesting to me. In Syracuse especially, which I thought was extra interesting because that's just down the road for us. So there's a lot of different things. Yeah, yes, Binghamton too, but they didn't feature Binghamton. And then just the personal accomplishment. So we have people that want to be certified because they want it in order to get new opportunities, be able to get some of those state contracts, etc. But some people just want to be able to hang the placard on their business, and that is a fine goal as well. I think that's extra important. I'm a huge person on personal accomplishments, and I have my own set of things that I want to accomplish. So if all you want is the gold star, great, that's fine too. Okay. So the contract system, so many of you, since you are not certified, you have not gone through that, the New York State contract system is where you would start. I have to admit, it is not the best. Okay, as someone who came from a business that had top-notch technology to then go to this, I was like, this is why things take so long. So what you would want to do is you will want to go to the New York State contract system. You'll want to create what is known as a business profile. And that just gets, it's basically your business card for your business. Okay, that gets you started before you do anything else. So you'll be able to go on there, and that's where you will apply for your MWBE certification. You can search for New York State certified firms on there. You can interact with other state agencies, etc., and authorities. So it's something you want to do. You want to keep that profile updated. So if your address changes, if your phone number changes, if you add a social media account, if you have a website, if your name changes because you get married, whatever it is, always make sure that you're keeping the most up-to-date information in there. That profile also transfers to some of the information when you do submit a certification application. It does go through there. So you just want to make sure everything is good, right? But it's your electronic business card. Okay. So certification criteria. That's a big thing, all right? And I'm glad you guys have your handouts because it's gonna help with some things. And any of the criteria listed here, you will be able, if you just went to Google and search New York State MWBE certification, you'll get right to our website, no problem. It's usually the top one on the list. And it does go over many of these items as well. So if you can't read it, if the font is too small, don't worry, you can find it other places, or you can just email me. Okay. The criteria under Article 15A is, so I'm going to read exactly how we have it, and then I'll talk about it. Okay. So Article 15A of the executive law, any for-profit firm that is at least 51% owned, operated, and controlled by citizens or permanent resident aliens who are either a woman and or minority is eligible for certification. Okay, so 51% ownership has to be to somebody who is a woman or a minority, and they are a citizen or permanent resident. Okay, and when we say permanent resident, we mean permanent resident, not like, oh, you have a 3-month permanent residency availability. You need permanent residency, green card, signed, sealed, delivered. And that's one thing that some people do get tripped up on. They may be here for asylum seeking or something, and they have kind of a permanent residency for a short period of time. We're looking for the people that are permanent residency for the 10 years. Because that's when they have to renew their green card for 10 years. Okay. Additionally, the minority groups that are eligible for certification. So we do get a lot of applications, where the applicants in general, if we looked at it, are not what we would consider just, I don't know, everyday person. So anyone who is of an ethnic background will think that they're a minority usually, okay? And we do get pushback on this often. But Article 15 lays out who qualifies as a minority and who does not. And that's what we have to go by. We have to go by what that is. How is that determined? That is determined by the study that they do every 5 years or so, and that kind of tells us. If something were to change in the disparity study and give a different indicator that someone else was considered a minority person, then it would be probably re-looked at. But generally, if it's not in this disparity study, it's not even looked at. So this is why this particular set is what we consider a minority group. Ownership. So ownership, operation, and controls. All firms seeking MWBE certification must be independently owned, operated, and controlled by a minority member and or woman. Okay, the ownership must be real, substantial, continuing, and the minority members and or women must exercise the authority to independently control the day-to-day business decisions. Okay, so that means often people will apply for MWBE certification if they are a franchise. Well, do you get to make every single decision if you're a franchise? No. So are you independently owned and operated? No. So those are some things you have to look at it. Is there something that is making the decisions beyond you? When that is being done. And I'm not talking about like everyday decisions like, oh, so-and-so is the manager of my shop and they make the schedule. That's not the kind of decisions we're talking about. We're talking about the core function, the operation of the business, okay? Business operations does not include things like general office management, administrative functions, etc. So you want to make sure when it comes to the core business function of your business, the MWBE person, the person relied on for certification, is the one that's making those decisions. Okay. You also want to make sure that they have the education, experience, expertise, right? So for example, a plumber should have plumbing experience, education credentials, etc. An electrician should have an education, the experience, the licenses, etc. Okay. If you don't have that, but that is your business, are you able to operate the business independently? So those are some questions that people often get caught up on. Are they able to operate that business independently? Do they have the education, experience, expertise solely? How do we look at it? Does the person relied on, if everyone else was taken out of the picture, have the ability to run that business? And that's how MWBE should be applying. Okay. Personal net worth. Personal net worth cannot exceed 16.3 million after the allowable deductions. I only in a couple of instances seen anybody get even close to this. So when you do your personal net worth, there is a statement that we provide in the application that you have to fill out. And if you're when you're filling out your personal net worth, if it's over 1.3 million, we make you do an additional form. But I don't see many of those often. Those forms are just kind of giving the layout of what your financials are. It's something that is required in the application. But again, let's see many that are crazy. And usually when we do see some of them, it's for like very specific types of businesses that there's already a small amount of those businesses and the pot just gets smaller as you get to MWBE, how many are available. Like the business I just recently saw is a business that they do underwater construction of steel. And the guy has like an insane personal net worth. But think about how many people probably are in that industry. So it's understandable. Okay. The other thing with personal net worth is one of the things that are allowable to be deducted is if there's a holding company in ownership of that business as well. That holding company, as long as they're established for the exclusive sole purpose of leasing machinery, equipment, vehicles, etc., to that business, that can be deducted. So independent, actively conducting business, and 1 year in business. So the firm must operate independently from any other business. So this is a little bit different from what I spoke about in the beginning on you operating the business as in you know how to do the daily operations and all that independently from someone else being able to fill that. So this is your business is not dependent on another business in order for your business to keep going. So for example, if you are a contractor and you only subcontract with one other business, or you only get your furnishings or your supplies from one other business and you don't look at any other supplier, that can be looked at as an independence issue, okay? When it comes to conducting business, actively conducting business, that means you're doing business on a regular basis. You have contracts, you're filing taxes, all those things. We look at all of those things to kind of establish what that means. And then the 1 year in business, you may or may not know this, you can actually get a waiver for that. So if you went from, let's say, a DBA, and you have gone into an LLC structure or you incorporated, however, if you were in business for 15 years before as just that DBA, but you started to really get more business, you can apply for a waiver for the 1 year in business. So many people don't realize that. You've had established business for years, apply for the waiver. I'm going to tell you, if there is a waiver when it comes to being able to apply sooner, you fill out that waiver, okay? It's only going to help you, and hey, they could deny it, they could accept it, but what does it hurt to apply for that waiver? Okay. The applicant firm must demonstrate is active business in the last year. Usually we do that by looking at your taxes. And we also ask for recent contracts. Okay. And then business operation for at least 1 year. I just addressed that. That waiver would go to my boss, the certification director. And he loves when I tell people. Meeting the small business restrictions. That means your firm does not employ over 300 people. Very rarely do we see this. And how we look at this is we take the average of your last 4 quarters on the 941s, federal 941s. So we'll go back to construction. You got construction season is only so long. They employ people for so many quarters, and then they have people laid off for so many quarters. So that's the best way that the division found at this point was to take the average of your most recent 4 quarters to get whatever that number is to see if you qualify. Often, I think in my time with the division, I've only seen a couple that go over that 300 mark. And again, once we do the average of those 4 quarters, they're not, because you can tell they're almost a seasonal business. Or we have also maybe employment agencies or things like that. So it can get a little weary, but most businesses don't have to worry about that 300 mark. For out-of-state firms, the applicant should be certified as an MWBE in their state or in a program outside of New York State first. Generally, it looks better if you are. Also, if you're certified in other programs, we do have some programs that we do partner with, which would allow you to do something called a fast track application. So all applicants must have the authority to do business in New York State, which means they would have filed with the New York State, Department of State. And I haven't stressed this as much as I usually do. If you have not filed to do business with the New York State Department of State based on your business structure, or got the certificate of business from your county, if you're a DBA, you need to do that before you apply for certification. The date on that has to be prior to you applying for certification. If it is not, your application will be rejected. That is one of the being authorized to do business in New York State is something we require, hands down. The division, after, all the troubles in getting so many applications that were either incomplete, or there was such a misunderstanding when it came to the certification process, they created a certification tool, certification assessment tool. I recommend all of you highlight, circle, go onto the website since you're not certified and use that tool. Okay, it's gonna have you answer like 12, 14 questions, which are most of the criteria that I just went over. And it's gonna give you an idea on, yes, I should move forward with doing the application, or maybe I don't have all my ducks in a row. I'm gonna tell you, often people don't have their ducks in a row and get denied or rejected. So you just wanna make sure the ducks are in a row. Once you fill out this form, it'll give you an answer immediately. It'll tell you, yes, it's a good idea to move forward. And under each of those, it's only like a drop down answer. So it's really easy to get those, 12 questions done. And get an answer on am I considered eligible? Am I not? When you read the question, read it as it's written. Don't interpret something. Read it as it's written. So if you do not have such and such document, if you have not registered and set, as an authorized business with New York State, answer the question that it's asking, because some people will think they're authorized to do businesses in New York State just because they file taxes for their business, but they didn't do that. So read the question as it's written. The applications. So we have a bunch of different applications. New application is probably what most of you would be looking at. The application itself, it really doesn't change whether you're a new applicant or you're a fast track applicant. We're looking at all the same stuff. If you're someone who is certified and you're doing a recertification, you're getting a shortened application, but you're going to be required to supply all the same documentation if we cannot find it current. Okay, so that's something some people don't generally understand. Currently certified businesses who want to do additional requests, they cannot do things like our addendums. So what we have offered, since many of you are first timers, we have the new application, which you go through and it's a bunch of questions, I don't know, 40 questions or so. And most of it is uploading documentation. In this presentation, I do have a list of what the documentation is, and I recommend you get all of that gathered before you start. So it's uploading all the documentation, etc. And then you have the ability to then do additional addendums. So if you wanted to be certified by New Jersey, New York Port Authority, or Buffalo, the city of Buffalo, etc. So 5 of our partners are on there. You can do these additional addendums. And once you get certified with us, we then pass that application on to them. The caveat with a fast track application, and some people don't understand, is not all documents necessarily get transferred. So we may get your application, we may get a shortened version of what you submitted in their application if you did them first and then put us as an addendum, but we won't get all those documents. So often you'll get a follow-up request that may have 20 questions on it, asking for a whole bunch of documents. So just so you're aware, when it comes to the certification applications, you may do this fast track. It's not because we're gonna ask for a bunch of documents. So now that you've been in this class, if you've done, if you go to do a fast track application because you've applied somewhere else, just get on there and there is a button for add additional material. Start adding all your additional material that you know that we're gonna require. Yes.
What's the benefit of the stop addendums? What does that get you if you're already on the MWBE list? What are these other?
So the addendums are only for somebody who's new. a new application coming in completely. So if you're already certified, then you wouldn't get an addendum. But if you are doing a certification, if you are applying for a brand new certification, you can do the one-stop addendum. So it's just basically adding to your application. You're now adding 4 or 5 other applications to it, allowing you to apply for 5 other programs that are out there within New York State. So it's just making that process, some of your information getting passed along to them, and really what you're filling out in that addendum is a permission slip to share that information. Yes.
So if, I work with a company that is New York City and New York MWBE certified, but they just started doing business in Buffalo. What is the process if they want to add on to get the Buffalo certification as well?
Since they're already certified, are they newly certified?
No.
No? Okay, so then they would want to go and they would want to seek out the application for the Buffalo
So
certification.
just specifically apply. Okay. They have all of this, but I didn't know it's a discussion.
Yep. And I know they all have different requirements, so even though that they are an addendum and there's something that we're offering as a courtesy, their requirements may be different. Okay, so often I'll get, well, I'm certified with New York City's program. You know, this question wasn't asked. We're different programs. We may operate under some of the same kind of functionality, but we're different programs. We have different interpretations. We have different requirements. Okay. The fast track applications, again, are only for those seeking New York State MWBE certification for the first time. Or they are certified by one of the 5 fast track partners newly and have at least 90 days remaining on their original certification. So certification has changed now from 3 years to 5 years. So if you're in your first 5 years of being certified and you haven't done that application or haven't done a recert, you're still technically new. So if you have 90 days left and you wanted to do one of those applications, you could. Okay. The partners for that are listed at the bottom. So New York City Small Business Services, County of Erie, City of Buffalo, Joint Certification Committee, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, New York and New Jersey Minority Supplier Development Councils, and the Women Presidents Educational Organization and the New York State chapter of Women's Business Enterprise National Council. Fast track applications additional, we have the SBA 8 Business Development Program application and the DBE Unified Certification applications. Those 2 are considered as fast track applications. We get a lot of these types of applications from out-of-state people that want to get certified in New York. These are just programs that you may have your certification through them. You followed their guidelines and now you want to be certified with New York. Again, they have their, they have their own requirements. And then, you just want to ensure, and you guys are all New York State, so I'm assuming, you have your authority to do business in New York State prior to doing the application. I can't stress that enough, because if you've done it, if you started the application and you get to the point where it's asking you to upload that document to prove it, and the date is after, we're gonna reject it. We're gonna reject it. So documentation, this is always the most fun part for people, and stressful, and I'm sorry. But providing this documentation allows the division to verify your certification eligibility, point blank. It includes information on ownership, operations, control, independence, personal net worth, among other things we look at. Okay, we have, as analysts, we have a lot of criteria we must go through. And so it really helps us tell the story. And the best way I can tell you is answer everything you can to the best of your ability, but be thorough in that answer. When we ask for things like a narrative, give us a narrative. When we ask for a resume, because every application requires a resume, this is the instance you're submitting a 6-page resume, not a 1-pager. Okay, we want to know what makes you the owner and the be-all end-all of that business. That is your time to shine. So when we ask for a narrative, give us a narrative. And it says in our questions, a detailed narrative on XYZ. Not just one sentence, because often I get things like, my day today is I manage the overall function of the business. Well, what does that mean? So I want a detailed narrative, okay? Because if I don't get the information, I can't check the box that that criteria is met, right? Certification affidavit is provided in the application when you do it. It must be notarized. Personal net worth affidavit, provided, must be notarized. Personal net worth affidavit attachment B, if you're over that 1.3, must be notarized. Okay, proof of minority status, the ethnicity attestation. So some people will just upload, maybe their passport if it has, they, came from one of our qualifying countries and think that will be suffice. It won't. It's best for you just to do the ethnicity attestation, which is a quick form. And if you have to get all those other things notarized, you might as well just take it along. Proof of citizenship, the proof of citizenship and gender, it is a requirement. And if you're recertifying and we notice on file, the one that you submitted previously has expired, we're gonna ask you for a new one. It's not that we don't believe that you still qualify, it's just, we want the most up-to-date documentation, okay? Proof of capital contributions. Again, this goes to reading the questions. So capital contribution needs to be, you need to have what it was you purchased, invested in, etc., to start your business. So what it was, where the money came from. If the money came from a joint account, you need to show, and this generally only applies to women, you need to show that those funds came from something you did. So for an example, I have my own business, but I wrote my check out of my husband and my joint checking account. I have to prove that I put funds into that. So how do I do that? My direct deposit. My direct deposit. I can show, you know, the direct deposit, I just pull my bank statement, highlight it, show them my direct deposit, and then maybe show my pay stub so they can see that these two things align. So we have to show the source of where the funds came from, okay? Proof of business activity, current contracts, bids. Current contracts have to have payment for doing that contract. So when we ask you for contracts, it'll say, and people often just stop at the first sentence, and not read the whole thing. We want contract, proof of payment, proof of deposit. So we want to see the contract with the scope of work that was done, that you were paid for that work, and that was deposited into your account. Okay, that shows us that the activity was done. Okay, people will often just give us contracts. Oh, and the contract also has to be signed. So that's a struggle some people have.
I have
Yes.
a question. When you're talking about contract, you're talking about how that has been awarded by some place like Ag and Markets?
Any contract for your business.
So
So-
if I have a contract to provide my donuts to Taste New York, or if I have a contract to vend at a farmer's market, is it that level?
It can be any place that you are providing your service or items to. So if you're Nancy wants cupcakes from you and you write up you don't deal with full contracts, you just do an invoices.
Mhm.
We need kind of a detailed invoice.
Okay.
So I can't just have you write 75. 75 what? So it really needs to be, 75 cupcakes, vanilla, frosted, like, at least give us the indicator. I just did a certification for, esthetician and nail person. And getting a contract for them, think about it, if you go and get those services done, you don't do a contract with them. But how she luckily had it was, she used, I don't know, one of those types of businesses that like just puts the thing in the end of the phone and then she can swipe your card. But on that, it was, so-and-so was the client. This was the dollar amount of their, I don't know, facial. And this was the dollar amount of their full set nail, like she had it all in there and the printout from this receipt. And it was really nice that it just kind of gave all this information. Now, was it in the best format? And would other analysts probably be like, I don't even know what this is? It was not in a very good format. It was like one of those pages that looks like the computer screwed up and just made a bunch of gibberish. But I went through and I highlighted to make out what was that business. And then I can see it had a date of when the service was paid for. It had the person's name who did the service. It had that it paid the applicant, to her such and such account. So it had all the criteria we were looking for, right? Then you need your personal and business taxes, 3 years worth. And it has to be the most current, starting with the most current. If you do something like file an extension, the extension is valid as long as it's still valid. However, we still require 3 years of tax returns. So that means you have to go back 1 more year from what you can provide me. So we still need 3 years tax returns. And then, so for example, people find an extension in 2022. That means most of their taxes were filed by October. Okay, and we know that. So if you're presenting me on January 1st, an extension that expired in October for last year's taxes, I can't process your application unless you provide those taxes for me. So I just had an applicant who, he said his CPA is sick and it hasn't done them yet. At this point, you have nothing valid that says you can't provide them. So then we would reject you based on you not being able to provide the documentation requested. Okay. Professional background, again, when it comes to professional background, any place in the application you can talk yourself or your business up, do it. Hard stop, any place. So that's where your resume, your licenses, permits, certifications, anything that applies to the core business function of your business, you want to make sure you shine on. Okay, so unless you are someone, your business is supplying AEDs and doing first aid and CPR classes, I don't care if you're CPR certified. I don't. We want it to be the core function of your business. If you are a doctor, we want to see those licenses. We want to see your New York State licenses to do that. We don't generally need to see you have the license to be a business. So some people will, show us, oh, this facility has been authorized by Broome County or whatever to be a functioning business. Yeah, we don't need to see that. We need that applies to your business operations, the things that make that be able to function. And then the additional certifications would be, if you are MWBE certified with someone else, that is always the icing on the cake. So include that. Okay. Membership, stock ledger, or narrative. We want to see who belongs to the business, etc. But that's generally for LLCs and corps. If you do not have a stock ledger and you're an LLC or a corp, you got to provide a narrative. So basically, if you don't have something, if in the course of your daily business, you don't do that. You don't do meeting minutes, provide us a narrative with the same information that would be found in there. Okay. And often the people that don't have those are sole owners anyways. But where this really comes into play is when you are a 2-person or more ownership to that business. We need to see how it's documented, okay? All W-2s and W-3s issued by the business. So I don't need to see if you have a job on the side, that W-2. I need to see what your business is issuing. Often we get people's personal things and we don't need that. We need to see what is issued by the business. Yes.
For the narratives,
Mhm.
the things that don't apply, they're just like on the company letterhead and then the white sign done, or is it signed, or is it the
How-
paragraph on the letterhead and attach it?
I'm not picky. If you provide me something, the system tells me it came from you. We prefer that there's generally a signature on things that makes it more authorized, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on a company letterhead. And sometimes I just have people, instead of submitting a document as a narrative, they just submit it as a written answer, almost like on an instant message to us. So however you find works best for you. Yes.
So you do or you don't need, say, a 20C certification from Ag and Markets for producing product. So we manufacture product, our license is through Ag and Markets 20C. Do you want to see that?
It's beneficial. So New York State has a whole laundry list of things that we actually reference. There's too many on it. For me to remember who's required. So often when I'm going through it, I'm flipping through to see if the NAICS codes you've requested and kind of the business summary you supplied me fits any of the requirements in that, because different agencies and authorities of New York may require a license. So I can't speak to if that is required. If they are who licenses your business, I would supply it, yes. Articles of organization and filing receipt or articles of incorporation, that is required. So that's just, you have filed with New York State Department of State to do business, and we need you to supply both of those items. We can verify it on the New York State DOS website, but we need to see that hard copy information from you. If you have not filed for this, I just recently learned this, that you can pay like $25 for them to file that, and they'll like expedite it within, I think, like 24 hours or something. So for some people, it's worth that $25. If you're not a New York State business, the application of authority and filing receipt, that means that you can do business in New York State. Or if you have a certificate of assumed name and filing receipt, so your name, if you're an outside of New York business and someone in New York already has the name that you have out of state, it's the name that you can go by within New York State. Okay. Operating agreement, partnership agreement, bylaws. These are governing documents of your business. Okay, so if you are an LLC, you're a partnership, you are a corp, we follow New York State business law. So it's not just our requirement, we follow New York State business law. So what New York State business law says that entity must have, we follow. So if you're a New York State business and you're a corp, you have to have bylaws and you have to provide them. If you are an LLC, you have to have an operating agreement. Okay.
If you're a school though, do you just do a narrative then?
It's best to have one.
An operating agreement?
Because that tells how your business is functioning, what happens if the business, if the owner doesn't want to be the sole owner. It'll tell who manages the business. So we do have many sole LLC owners I've seen. There's like, oh, I don't know if they got it on Word or where they got it, but like a 1 or 2 page, like it's really brief. But it kind of gives the main points of the business.
Thank
you. Okay. And if your business has been sold in the past, or there have been changes, anything that has amended those agreements, we want to see that. That also comes with meeting minutes. So if you made changes to ownership, let's say so-and-so was 100% owner, now it's a 51-49 split, that change we need to see. And there's other documentation you provide that will indicate changes. So it's best to make sure that you're providing everything, to tell that story. So if you don't do meeting minutes, make sure if you're providing an operating agreement or bylaws, and in that your exhibit A to those says ownership changed on this date, you're providing a narrative that explains it, or you're gonna be asked for one, okay? And if I'm giving the impression being asked for something is a pain, it's not. It just, to me, providing what you can up front does make it go by quicker. Because the first thing we do as an analyst is we go through the application with our criteria list. And if something is incomplete or a document is missing the other part of the story, we have like pinpoints in everything we're looking at. We're just gonna add a question to our Q&A. Okay? Meeting minutes. If you keep them in the course of business, we need the criteria there. First meeting of members, managers, transfer of any ownership, changes in officers. If you don't, narrative. So basically the default should always be narrative. Okay? Current lease or deed for where the business does business. So if your office, if you're someone who does, let's say, I don't know, brokers for people, okay? And your office is out of an extra bedroom in your house, I need the deed to your house. That's it. But if you have a storefront, I need the lease to that storefront. So often we have people say, well, my business doesn't do it. Wherever you are functioning that business from, we need the lease. If you have a virtual office something agreement, which I don't really understand, but I guess it's important. We need that, okay? If you have, we have businesses that are out of state, but may have like an office in New York City or may have a virtual office in New York City. They have a PO box in New York City to give them a residency credit. We need the lease for that PO box. So wherever you're operating from, whatever is making that business is claiming as an address, we need that.
So we're operating from our home, right? That's our registered address.
Mhm.
But we cook, let's say here at the kitchen. You need the deed to my home?
Mhm.
Okay,
So you're producing your product out of the kitchen,
yeah,
but you're producing your, like, that's not technically your business.
right.
Yeah, you just, it's like, I have to go to Staples and, make a bunch of copies. So like, that's not where your business is referenced back to.
It's whatever the registered.
Correct. Yes.
To add on to that piece though, if their licensing has a separate address, does that matter?
Not usually, because we understand that, that can change.
So the licensing on addresses, it doesn't always have to match.
Correct.
Okay.
Your bank signature card, that's just telling us who is the authorized signer on your bank account. Banks can also, provide a letter, and the elements we need in that letter, who is on that business account, what is their level of authority on that account. If you don't provide that, we're gonna ask for it. Some banks are really easy about giving the signature card and some are not, okay? Third-party agreements, other agreements, anyone you have an agreement with. So if you have a partner, if you have a priority vendor, whoever it is, we wanna see it. We want that agreement, okay? Subcontracts and proof of payment. So if you only do XYZ work, but you also offer something else that someone else does, we want to see that. Right?
One more question back here.
Yes.
How much of that, if you have hundreds of customers, and you get purchase orders from some of them, but the rest is just take this and we're being emailed like, how much of that information are we turning over?
So we need 3 current contracts. 3 current contracts, or what we say is we try to meet the businesses where they are. So not everyone does a contract, and we understand that. But you have to give us enough information to tell the story. So if it is, the way you do service is through an email, you gotta give us the email exchange so we can align it with maybe, you know, your very brief invoice and proof of payment. So if the email gives more of the scope of work and what isn't included, that needs to be provided. Mhm. Yep, 3 contracts, and the contracts will go into contracts and taxes. I tell people all the time, will also contribute contracts, taxes, and if you do payroll, will contribute to the proof of the applicant business is actively conducting business in New York and proof of significant business presence in New York. So if you have business taxes in New York, you've already hit the requirement there, just submit that same documentation. Don't like rattle your brain to find something else, just submit that again, okay?
Like the tax or quarterly tax?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, optional documents, disclosures on, trade secrets, just says, you know, I wanna be exempt from sharing my information or I don't. And you just write a statement, please exempt me from sharing my information. And then additional supporting documents, if there's additional items that you need to provide, that you think would help make the story clear, that's important to do. Common pitfalls, not all items in the application for the for a document are included in the submission. If you are filling out an application and you're doing a lot of not available, not available, not applicable, not applicable, you don't have the right application. I promise. Okay, make sure you're filling in all the blanks. So I can tell you where people always mess this one up is on the attachment A, 3rd paragraph down. There is a line at the last part of that paragraph. People always leave it blank. We need you to put a number in there. If you don't put a number in there, we're gonna send it back. And then their inability to prove competency in the industry, or they give an incomplete response or no response. Okay, so again, I really stress making sure that you are doing everything complete. Processing time, like I said, within 120 days. So that's good. That's a real benefit for our MWBEs. And then the different options, I'll just tell you, return is ends the review on our analysis side. That means someone caught it when we were going to intake it, that maybe you didn't fill out the right application for your business. So they're returning it to you. Rejection is, it ends the review by us. That means something in there doesn't fit. And we tell you in a letter what didn't make sense. So you didn't fill out, fill out the ownership correction correctly, or it's not the right business structure, or whatever it is. We give you 90 days to then resubmit the right information. A withdrawal is on you. So let's say there are items that you know you can't provide right now because maybe you're in the middle of a sale of a portion of your business, okay? And you can't provide everything we need. You can request to withdraw that application, and then there's no time limit on it anymore. That used to have a 90 days as well. Now you can resubmit whenever you feel that you have the right amount of information. Approval?
Sorry, if we have incomplete documentation, is that a rejection? And then
So
we
if
apply-
you realize that you cannot fulfill the request of the analyst, it will be. So if
Okay,
an analyst asks you for something and your response to them is, I don't have that, or my accountant needs to provide that for me, and you can't get it to them by the due date they are requesting, request to withdraw your application. Because that will then allow you to reapply whenever you are available. If you let us just reject it, it puts a 90-day wait period on you. Okay, so if an analyst, and at the top of any of our Q&As, it will tell you If you do not respond to this in fully, it will be rejected. And you will have a 90-day waiting period. Approval determination, that means you meet everything. And then denial determination, a business can reapply, after 2 years. There are waivers if something changes within that based on the denial that you can get, but I can't necessarily speak to what is approved on that and what is not, because once my recommendation goes to the decision team, can't tell you what happens with it other than, sometimes I get yelled at and sometimes I get thank yous. So, but the last page has different resources for you. And, my email address is not on there, but I can, give it to you if you are looking for it. It is Colleen, COLLEEN BARTON at esd.ny.gov.
And we'll reshare that. Amy has a question in the back here.
So if somebody gets caught up in their application process,
Mhm.
that number that you have shared up here, the 212, is there an actual person that they're gonna be able to talk to?
Yes, it's our customer care team.
Okay, so, and that person can help guide them through any question that they have in the application?
So when you ask for any question, you mean on what is the document or how do I submit said document?
It would be like, what are you seeking? Like if the question isn't understood, like what exactly they're seeking there? So what documentation is needed? I don't understand.
To a certain point, they can.
Okay,
Because they are not analysts. They are more of your pinpoint on, I'm in the certification application and I'm trying to upload such and such here, but it won't let me.
so they'd be better off reaching out to you directly via email?
That probably is, when it comes to a certification specific question on what is this document, why do I need it? Reaching out to me, or even looking at our website does have a lot of FAQs on it for certain items, and it does tell you some of the documentation and why we may be asking for it, etc.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I missed the last part of your email, ESD dot what?
.New York NY
Okay,
.gov.
thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'll be here.
Thank you, and thank you for staying, so that way we can continue to network and ask questions and answers. So before we bring up our next speaker, I want to introduce you to Precious. And Precious comes to us from our Harvest New York team. She is our supply chain specialist that works across the entire state. She's sponsoring these WMBE workshops across New York State in partnership with Ag Markets, ESD, and Cornell Cooperative Extensions. And so she's just gonna do a little let's go around the room to get to know one another, and so that way you can get to know her as well. Precious?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this workshop. Safety information. Can we get a quick temperature check in the room to see who we have here? Just quickly introduce yourself and what business you have and where you're located.
Wonderful.
My name is Christina Parker. I'm the owner of Believe Goods and Believe Records. Right now I'm currently located at my home. Believe Good provides handmade goods, and we also sell food on occasions and mostly in the summertime. I Believe Records, well, you guys know that a record label for music artists and independent, so they can work on their own stuff independently without worrying about the big time that's coming after them.
And can you hear her? Just for better hearing, stand up and like kind of face that way so they can hear you. Yes, they heard you, but I think we'll just make it easier for but people's ears that are listening.
I'm Sarah Rosenthal. So I work with CCE in Madison County as the Ag Economic Development.
Thanks, Sarah, for being here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ebony Hato. I am a presenter for today, but I also work at the Cooperative Southern Tier Incubator. I'm a business advisor over there, and I'm also serving as the diversity officer.
Hi, my name is Anika. I am the owner of Blender's Juice Bar. I just started my LLC last January. So it's been a year, I'm not fully in operations yet, but I'm getting to that point. So it's gonna be a juice bar soon.
I am being at Budokan and Budokan's located now on Pine Street. We reopened. Yes. And I'm adding bacon.
And we are a own Cheeky Monkey Foods. We make a tomato garlic oil that has presence in a couple hundred stores. Been involved with Taste New York, almost since the inception, for a couple of years, but definitely looking, to increase avenues for, development. I'm super interested in the program, for a number of reasons, but they make tomato garlic oils and, spice mixes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Gus. I own Christelle's Catering Company. Just started, so great to be here and learn more about it. I'm located in. I'm Katie Matsushima. I work here at CCE Broome County. I'm the product development specialist and also the commercial kitchen manager. If you've ever been over our farmers there.
Hello, my name is Sujamali Grashada. I own the Soulful Foods LLC. Currently I provide a hot food at the farmers market down here. And I looking forward to more to do for my business.
Hi, I'm Myron Thurston. I work for CCE Oneida County and do economic development and supply chain management and work with New York City food banks and food distributors. So super excited to learn about how people can get in the MWBE in New York City.
I'm Julie Henry. We own Black Dog Honey and Henry Sons, and we sell New York and a couple of other stores in Broome County, and I won't take you into one other. I'm Amy Weaver. I'm the owner of Flaming Bag Catering, and I cook out of the Cornell Cooperative Extension Kitchen. And I'm looking to see if there's any programs that we can tap into to help with this.
My name is Shantae. I currently own Sweet Taste LLC. We currently work throughout from the commercial kitchen. We are in the Taste of New York. We do custom cakes, it's a bunch of different things, but we're located right here at the commercial kitchen. I don't know what to say.
We're all 41 others are fabulous.
I'm Eileen Sullivan. I got a better story than you. I don't have a business. I'm currently ending a 30+ year career in. I want to have that business someday. It's just like a great opportunity to get some really great information. Yeah. Like it.
Hi, I'm Marshall McMurray. I currently do have a MWBE for my real estate company, MCM Realty. But right now I'm going after another one for my coffee business, Precious LLC. I used to have a coffee shop in Endicott, had sold coffee, and now I'm looking for some buyer.
Morning, this is Stone, it's 7 Stone Farm, we're in Brooklyn, New York, Circle County. We just finished the first year with raw hay and sunflowers.
Hi, my name is Allison King. I own Kingsgate Pastry Shop, but I've been owning it in New York. And I'm looking to come into Binghamton or so. I work with Ebony. And I'm here also working for the to apply for my MWBE.
I am Michelle with Back Pro Gourmet. I'm from here in Acton Woods, Troy, New York. I started out here at the kitchen with these wonderful people. We've been in business almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years today, or July. And we make packaged food products, sauces, mustards, jam. And we now have a storefront in Troy, New York, where we have our commercial kitchen. And then we have a retail store, so, and hopefully we'll see that.
My name is Amy Willis. I'm the director of our food system project here at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Burke County. I also oversee our Taste New York programs, which we have 2 of them here. A lot of familiar faces, but definitely can't wait for the networking part to talk to people here as well. So thanks for coming today. We really appreciate you spending your time learning with us.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, I'm just gonna have you all stand up and take a big stretch. That's all you need to do, right? Stand up, stretch. If you need to go to the ladies' room, the gentleman's room, the bathroom, you can get up, you move around as you want, and then in about 3 minutes, I'm gonna introduce our next speaker. So you have 3 minutes to warm up your coffee, 3 minutes, get a little wiggle in. If you need to go to the bathroom, just go in and out when you need to. Take care of your own selves. No formal bathroom break, just if you need to go, get on.
That was too cute.
You need anything? Water,
I'm not appreciative. It's one of those things that's been on my radar. So you're not? I'm not, no. I'll give you my card. I've been involved with it. It's probably like not an easy question.
So it's definitely not done by us. But so the. But I'm majority of every ADP and everything. So that's always a priority. So for them to do the business, they have to quote on different things with business. And of course, they're always looking. But what they're not seeing are higher. And so then
my guy that I've really it's mind blowing. Anyway, oh, wonderful. This is delicious. They carry it in the store here and in a bunch of places. They're trying to get me to be in more places, but I've been so overwhelmed, but it's coming this year. These are juices and super indebted to you. Super indebted. Somebody, so if you have questions, thank you very much.
I knew if I said everyone networking, it would start early, so I'm gonna bring you back. Sorry to bring you back in. I promise we have tons of time built in for you to chit chat. So I'm going to now introduce Ebony Hot Toe. Ebony Hot Toe. You know, it's important that, excuse me, if I can get your attention. Thank you, I'm so sorry, we just need to keep us moving, so we're ready for lunch. Hot who is the Associate Director of Equity and Justice for New Energy New York. Ebony's a graduate of Binghamton High School, and Davis College. After graduating, she pursued a career focused on service, working as the director service professional before achieving her bachelor's degree. Since then, she has focused on workforce development and small business consulting. Sounds like we're in the right place. And she has now got into the procurement industry. And that is an industry that many of you are in or are venturing through. Miss Pato. See, it's very customary to learn how to say someone's name. And I went over and talked to Ebony and never asked her, so I'm flying on the seat with my pants here. But she started her WME firm in 2015, and by 2020 has moved into coaching other business owners. And so here's someone who you'll really want to connect with during the the networking session. In 2023, she began as the DEI officer at the new regional workforce program called New Energy New Europe, NENY, you see that acronym everywhere. And that focuses on building up the electrical vehicle supply chain with diversity-centered focus. If any of you have those electric cars or want some, or want electric energy for your business, Ebony seems to have a layered approach of knowledge for us. She continues to support entrepreneurs looking to expand their business and create long-term sustainability. In her volunteer time, she serves on local boards and recently completed a term as president of the Southern New York Community Land Trust. So welcome, Ebony, to this wonderful group of folks that we have here.
Thank you so much. I thank you. I understand the want and the urge to mingle because this is a very exciting topic. Once I heard about MWBE, I just really got into it, and I haven't stopped talking about it and championing it across the state and across the nation, actually, to everybody that I meet. In the end slides of my presentation, we'll talk about New Energy New York a little bit, but this is a food and ag event, so I didn't kind of want to mix and mingle the topics. I'm gonna stand because I just feel like I speak better and talk better when I stand. So my product or service is marketing. That's the product that I started with in 2016. I taught myself coding language. So I taught myself HTML and CSS so I could learn what was going on in the background of websites. And then I started building websites for local nonprofits and people who came by word of mouth. And so that's kind of how I built up my authority and my brand awareness and all other kinds of things in regards to marketing. And I was able to then start taking clients out in the community and helping them build their business. And I am self-taught. Some people call us we went to YouTube University, so that's me. And it's been working, right? You can learn everything on YouTube. So, yeah. So I received my certification in 2019. Colleen was talking about the pipeline going through in 120 days, and I was like, whoa, inside, because I actually submitted my application December 30th, 2017. And so I was not actually certified until April of 2019, so it took a while. But once I got certified in April, somebody found me through the MWBE directory. We'll talk about that later as well. And I received my first contract and had received my first check by October 2019. So in that year, I made close to $50,000, a little bit over 48,000. And I was like, whoa, MWBE is lucrative. I'm doing this. Just a little timeline there for you. So I started out as a sole prop, got my DBA downtown, and I did everything through that business structure. And then in 2019, when I had made that 40K that was untaxed, right? I was like, uh-oh, I gotta do something about that because they're gonna tax me through the roof, right? And so then that's when I switched over to the S Corp structure for my business. As a business advisor at the Cooperative Incubator, we are authorized to help you kind of figure some of that out. I know some folks are, when you go to speak to a business advisor, they're kind of, they have some trepidation, right, about telling you what to do and how to set up your business and all that kind of stuff, but I've been given the okay. So if you're interested in trying to figure out what is the best tax situation for your business and for yourself, you can always come over and talk to us about that. And so once I got the hang of it, I expanded quickly. So between 2019 and 2023, I started up four more businesses. I do have a lead abatement business that is solely owned by me. And what we do is we found a contract with the health department. So I don't know if you know the health department remediates lead in homes. In Durham County, we have a high instance of lead poisoning for children. And so it's a very pertinent and relevant health crisis that we're having right now. And so I wanted to be involved in the repair of that and helping to remediate and fix that problem here locally. I started off, my marketing company was called Gilead Media Marketing. And then when I switched it over to the S Corp structure, I changed the business to Gilead Business Solutions. I felt that gave me a wider range of clients that I could take in. But also, when people are looking for me in that MWBE directory, I get a wider range of clients and requests as well. During the pandemic, my children were bored, and so we had this challenge where I asked them to, take half an hour and write down a business plan, write down a business they were gonna start. And one of my daughters decided that she wanted to have a bubble tea brand that everybody could drink, and so we started, Big Vegan Bubble Tea. And then also during the pandemic, because I get very bored, I started a travel agency, that was international, so we're headquartered in Ghana, West Africa. So everybody's wondering, okay, we heard all the important documents and requirements and criteria from Colleen, but is this, how do you work it, right? Is this actually attainable? Are people actually making money? How do you do that? And we're gonna get into some of that. So if you're wondering, when should I start? You should start now. The time is now, right? Because MWBE, especially for people who come from disadvantaged communities, right? Or historically left out and marginalized communities, like some of us in the room, this is a long-term wealth building strategy. I was able to make what? Over $30,000 in like 4 months, you know what I mean? And so if you're out there looking for the contracts and you're putting yourself out there in front of the buyers through the state authorities and things like that, the contracts will come to you and you will be able to find them. And we'll go into some of where to look for work in a few slides from now. You get to pick and choose who you want to be, right? What type of entrepreneur you want to be, what type of business you want to have. Whereas like Colleen was talking about earlier with franchises, you don't get to make all of the decisions, right? If you decide to buy a Domino's franchise and then you decide you actually want your colors to be green and purple, that's not happening, right? Domino's is red, white, and blue. We know this. It's not changing. But you can, you know, be the author of your own business destiny, if you will. And then it's also a way to build in some stability into your business because 1-year contracts are common, but you could also get up to 5-year contracts. And so, you know, building some stability and know where your money is coming from for the next 5 years or so. And also give you time to look for other contracts that may be lucrative. And leveraging. So Colleen got into a little bit about MWBE certification in other states. But I'll talk a little bit more about it. So once I was certified in New York State, I decided to start looking at the other states across the nation, right? Because every state has a MWBE requirement, it's federal. And so every state has a program. And you can actually get certified. Once you're certified in your home state, you can get certified in others and be able to 10x your profits. If that's something that you're looking to do. So you can get multi-state certifications. You can also get municipality certifications. So she talked about Erie and Buffalo, but the city of Syracuse has its own MWBE certification that you could get. And then also having a state certification or any supplier diversity certification really builds up your brand authority among your other channels. So distribution channels, supply chain partners, they'll recognize, oh, and they'll look at you more often because you do have a certification as like a partner or prime or someone that they could do business with. So how to find work. And Precious, you can share this presentation with folks if you want to, because these links are clickable. And it'll take them to the contract reporter. Listen, can I click now? Yeah, take it now. So the state contract reporter looks like this, and this is where you will find most of the contracts in New York State. I'm not logged in, so we can't go directly in and look at any of the bid documents, but oh, you can see this. It's because of the way it's not showing. It doesn't show me the word. Okay, can we go back to the presentation then? Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so that looks like it's not gonna work out right now, but, the contract reporter is where you will find most of the bids that are released through New York State. They kind of try to have a one-stop place for you to look for those. Similar with the word to describe that, I can't figure out. But it's like sure, a single point of entry. I don't know why I was trying to say that, but that's what I was trying to say. So it's a single point of entry where you can find all of the bids that come out for that day. And they refresh that every day. And you can also go in there and put in alerts. So say if you only want food services bids to come to your email, you can do that. For me, for example, I have like office furniture, paper goods, marketing and advertising, right? So when those bids come out for the day, they actually come to my email and I'm able to look at them every morning to see what bids came out. Contract system, Colleen kind of showed you all already, but there are some secret little portals in there as well. And that's also where the MWBE directory is, and where people can find you at. You can also find some of the lower requirement bids or like bids that are low cost, so like $50,000 under sometimes. You can find at the bottom of the contract system as well. And then municipality websites. So most municipalities that are participating in transparency will have a RFP or a bid tab where you can go on and see what types of contracts they have there as well. On these two is the city of Bloomington. And then on the bottom where it says websites, and then on the top where it says municipality, if you click that one, it'll take you to the town of Hempstead. I happen to know that the town of Hempstead pretty much bids out everything they buy. And so sometimes that might be a smaller contract that you can win just to get your feet wet. And then the New York State Office of General Services also is a central place to find bids, but most of the time they're just loaded into the contract from what I see. So the MWBE directory is, Colleen talked about it earlier, where you kind of put in a description of your business and services you offer with your NAICS code, but it's really a benefit for us, I think, more than it is for the authorities in that they can find you directly. And my very first contract came from someone who found me in the MWBE directory. So I didn't even have to look for that contract. I just had to be the lowest bidder, which I was, and I didn't. So you want to make sure that you have your contact information, like Colleen said earlier, and always keep that updated. I won't go too much into that because she did a good job of explaining why.
Oh, thank you.
And your company profile. So I will dig into this a little bit. You want to include your NAICS codes that you're working under now, even if it's not the one that you got certified under, but they're associated with it. You kind of want to put those in there too, because you can always, find a supplier, distributor, and kind of move into supplying something other than what you're certified for. You also want to make sure that you include the description that's included with your NAICS code, include that in there because
What is the NAICS code?
Sure. Your NAICS code is an industry code that they're standardized across the nation. And so it'll be like I guess it's like 7 or 8 digits long. Six, thank you. And it tells people, buyers, the government, what industry you're in, what products you sell. And you can look for it at census.gov. Okay. Census.gov. Or you can just kind of sometimes just Google, like put a keyword for your industry. So say if you had a bakery, you put bakery and then put NAICS code, NAICS, and just Google that. And sometimes it'll pop up that way and take you to other different portals where you can.
So it's not an individualized code, it's just, it's a general code based off of what you produce or do?
Yep.
Okay,
Or your industry that you're in.
okay.
On certification side though, There is a general code for the top, so like,
Mhm.
general contractor. So there's a primary code, you know, let's say, and
Like
this
the
is,
first two
yeah.
numbers.
No, actually the 6 digits. So let's say, NAICS code 548133. I have no idea what that is, but, all right, and it'll say it fits under, let's say, general construction. But under that, it'll have the same code with more details. We don't accept the general code. We want to know the specific one that you're falling under. So if you are a general contractor who does, let's say residential remodeling, construction, like it'll say more of that detail. We will not certify you in general under a general code unless there is absolutely nothing else we can find to justify it. And it's very rare. There's only a couple of industries that we do that for with like one particular code. So you don't want to use a general code because the analysts won't approve that.
That's a great point. It is important to be specific, right? Because it's as technical as, say, if you make backdrops, right? You make backdrops for parties, but you don't supply paper, right? You might still have the same code, but like promotional items might be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then paper will be 4, 5, 6, 7, 2. You know what I mean? So you definitely want to get into the specifics of it and make sure that it matches the service or product that you actually have.
And there's a paragraph descriptor with every one of them. Read that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't read that, you'll get tripped up sometimes where there could be another code that really does fit you better because you don't, for instance,
Furniture is a good one, dorm furniture or office
Like-
furniture.
you either manufacture it, it'll say something like about manufacturing, or you supply it or something, but you don't do those things in that description, so that negates what the code would be. But what you do is, you know, you are the wholesaler or something. So you want to make sure you're reading that and read it as how it says, and then say, do I do what this description says?
And if it matches up, that's the description that you want to put that full descriptor plus the NAICS codes into your company profile. Again, you want to make sure it's keyword rich, and you can do that by copying the description, but then also you want to have a short paragraph. When I say short, I mean short, 3 to 5 sentences. You don't want it to be too long because these folks are, you know, searching through businesses from across the state, right? And there might be 1,700 businesses that do marketing, right? And I want to look at that quickly and decide if they're right or if they're not a good fit, right? And then, the third key to success, keep it short and simple. The 3 tips for sizing the market. So how do you find what authorities are best to work with? The best places to look to sell your goods? And my first tip to people is to study old RFPs. So RFPs are requests for proposals, and those are bids and quotes. A lot of these words are used interchangeably. But look at old ones, right? And look at the scope of work, see what the requirements were. Could you provide what they were looking for? Could you deliver what they were asking? If it's, for example, say if you were delivering an office machine and it needed maintenance, were you able to negotiate maintenance with the distributor, right? Where they would come out every 6 months or yearly, and is that a requirement in the RFP, and is that something that you're able to negotiate? One good one that I was looking at last week with a client was the city of Buffalo. They bid out a lot of their stuff too. We'll talk about that on a different slide, but they were looking for somebody to bake their bread at school lunches for the year. And so, you know, we went and looked at that old RFP and, you know, tried to see if that was something that she might be able to do. And then once you understand what you're looking at, then start looking at active bids, right? Ones that are open right now, see what the due date is. Oh my gosh, it's in 90 days. Is that something that I could be able to put together, right? Or, oh, this one they gave 6 months. Does that mean it's a larger requirement? You know, just kind of trying to size everything and see if it's something that you're actually able to handle. And then, start practicing with micro bids. And so that's where municipalities will come in. You can look at those municipality websites, it's in your town, right? You don't have to go all the way to Troy or Albany to deliver the product. It's right inside your town or your local area. And, it might be more attainable for you. Some other places where you can find micro bids are nonprofits. So anybody spending state funds actually should be spending 30% of that with MWBEs. And that includes nonprofits like the United Way or, I don't know, whoever else, the YMCA or whoever it might be. Okay, so we're gonna talk about some of our offerings at the Cooperative through New Energy New York. So New Energy New York is a new workforce development program. And what we're focusing on is making Binghamton a electric vehicle battery hub that will source the world, right? So we're really trying to rival China as far as manufacturing and innovations go. And we have space at the incubator for people who are interested in, getting into the supply chain. So learning about batteries and possibly becoming a manufacturer, or people who are interested in training and will be working at some of the local factories that are going to be coming down the pipeline. One of the main factories is going to be here on campus. IM3 New York is a current tester and manufacturer of the lithium ion battery. And so that's our goal right there with that. Even though in the past we have been known as a high-tech incubator, with New Energy New York, our focus is really Main Street businesses, women, vets, LGBTQ-owned businesses. We want to get those people who've been on the margins and really bring them into the entrepreneurial landscape so that we can increase economic development in our local area. So, although a lot of the information that you see on the news is talking about batteries and science and all that other stuff, we are looking for people who are working in food businesses, people who have written a book, right? Or people who are looking into manufacturing. So one of the examples.
What's the correlation between food businesses and battery production?
Oh, nothing,
Okay.
nothing. We're just focusing on Main Street businesses
Okay.
and everybody because we're trying to break down the stigma that the Kaufman Incubator was strictly for like white science guys.
Got it.
Right? We want everybody to be able to come in that building and feel comfortable and feel well. I lost my train of thought. No, it's okay. So even though we're talking about batteries, one of the things that we're doing is offering small business courses, and some of the people in this room have already taken them. So during mingling, if you want to talk to them about it, you can ask them about it, but we're doing a customer discovery course, which is 3 days. You come 2 days back to back, and then we give you a week to do customer discovery, so go out and talk to people, and then you come back for one more day and tell us about your scientific findings. During those 2 days, of course, lecture and stuff, though, we talk about the business model canvas and the beginnings of your business plan and what goes into it, what does that look like, and we really kind of flesh that out during class, and then you're able to do your customer discovery, talk to people, and come back and just give us, an overview of what you're doing. So then, for participating in that, we're giving out stipends, so you can earn $1,000, no strings attached. You can use it for your business. You can use it for childcare, transportation, whatever you might need it for. We don't ask. We just want to show that we are interested in industry and interested in people's businesses and economic development locally. So that's my colleague, Carrie.
Hello, sorry.
So after participating in customer discovery, you could be invited, because we only have 10 slots for the accelerator program. The 12-week accelerator, again, we go over, all kind of different business concepts, business model, business plan, marketing, customers, all different kinds of stuff, taxes. And then after completing that 12 weeks, one night a week for 12 weeks, you could be eligible for $1,000. So essentially you could earn up to $4,000 in stipends for your business, no strings attached. But one of the examples that I give is, somebody could take that $4,000 and decide they want to buy a 3D printer because they want to be involved in the battery supply chain. So some of the people who may have been around a child, I would assume people have kids in here, but if you've ever tried to put like an electronic toy together and there's like that plastic piece. And then there's that white connector with the black strip and the red strip to the power battery or whatever it is. So somebody could actually print that little white piece with a 3D printer out of their garage or their craft room, right? And be involved in the battery supply chain in that way. And you'll be getting your contracts, you'll be making money with your business. So there's a lot of opportunities, and what we're trying to do is get people to participate in the training so you can understand the mechanics, and then you'll be able to possibly apply that to different battery applications, whether it be a phone, a car, a toy. Now we have electric snow blowers, right? So there's all these different mechanics that you can apply in regards to the battery industry. So I know we didn't come to talk about that, but I just wanted to give you a brief talk and tell you what we're doing over there. But to supplement that, on Saturday mornings, I myself will be at the office, and you can message me. I have my contact info later. You can message me to set up an appointment, and we're doing MWBE readiness open office hours. So while you're doing your application, you can come in and ask questions. Maybe you might not understand some paperwork, we can go through it. Or maybe you're missing something and you need to figure out what your narrative is going to be. We can help you figure out all of that. And there's my contact info again. Oh, they have printout. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, but if you want it digitally, because you need the links, you know, I'm hoping that Precious will send that to you, but here's my contact info. If you're interested in coming in on Saturday, or if you're interested in receiving some of those stipends through getting entrepreneurship training, you can reach out to me and we'll get you on the list. Sure.
Question. One of the reasons, besides the length of time it takes to get certified, one of the reasons that we haven't gone for an MWBE certification. We make packaged food products. What opportunities are there for a business like ours through like the contracts and, you know,
Sure.
is there anything for us?
There sure is. There sure is. So I don't know exactly what you make, but say if you made fruit cups. Kids get that at school, right? There's some school districts that give a snack to kids after school. I know they do at JC for people, for kids who are doing sports or have some type of after school activity, they get a snack, right? And so you might find a school district is open to buying what you have. You could find something on OGS where the state is buying it in bulk, you know, en masse for like the whole state to supply somebody. So there are different options.
I can say that Taste New York does have a 30% that we're providing, so I think
Why?
organizations, you know, organizations like these too, there is the 30% requirement to be seeking out, and we're not looking for just one type of thing, like we spoke about furniture, right? That's always part of it, but we're seeking any that are the MWBE as well. So food obviously falls into the Taste New York piece. Yeah. Okay.
And then, to pivot off that a little bit, is that there could be a larger contractor who has a contract with the state, and within their contract, anyone they subcontract out needs to fit the MWB requirement. So you may not be able to supply directly to the school district, but you're supplying to someone else who's doing the mass supply to the district, covering more than just one entity. So there's a couple of different ways.
There's buying consortiums. One is called Sourcewell. They're based in Minnesota, but they serve different states. It seems like you had a question.
Well, I did, but I think she clarified. So everyone, when you're doing an MWBE contract, even the subcontractors are obliged to be certified.
Sometimes there is a clause, in many that we see, there is a clause that said anyone who performs this work does need to make sure that the subcontractor maintains their certification if they're utilizing someone to go towards that utilization credit.
Right.
So like the new Legoland that just opened downstate, they had a 30%. And so like I got an email saying, hey, we might need marketing services. Would you please come to this kind of like in-service we're having before we start building, so we can, you know, build a rapport with each other, get to know each other, and then you'll be on the subcontracting list.
Just to speak on the food side one more time, Some of those things might be bulk as well. I know a lot of people in here do focus on the small retail side of things. So that might be something that you'd want to consider as well as kind of researching your scale up.
Yep. Sure.
So should we go for the WBS first before attempt? Or as considered looking for?
No, I would be always be working on it at all times, you know, learning, there's always something to learn, there's always something changing. And like I said, you know, like looking at the old ones to see if it's something you can handle, to see what they're asking for, how do they word it, you know, all these different things. Start familiarizing yourself with the lingo and making it make sense, because it does take a while to get used to.
And just one extra detail to that, the only thing, so anyone can go for a state contract, whether you're certified or not. The only thing is you wouldn't be counted towards their utilization, the MWBE utilization, till you have the certification.
And so I just want to say to my white women, you know, sometimes you all do not think you're involved in this minority caveat category, but you are, right? So these things are out there for you too. You know, don't poo-poo it away, because that money, you're leaving money on the table.
Well, and I've said it before, but I've been in business. I had a restaurant for like 13 years and I've seen a fair amount of, you know, racism, discrimination, but I've seen, you could exponentially 10 times that. I've seen gender bias, and like I was telling Colleen, I've had Cisco salespeople not want to shake my hand. They would prefer to deal with a guy that was working for me, and, you know, a college student. So I think it's such a great opportunity.
Black women, how many times have you been in the room and people didn't think you were the owner? Right? So it's still out there. It exists.
And black men.
Yeah, black men's 100% black men. Yep.
And women.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, everybody's, the nation, the state made mistakes in the past, and they're really trying to repair it through programs like this. And so, you know, we just have to kind of be a part of it, or it won't exist. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know about nonprofits until that 30%, because I never knew that.
Yeah.
And I sit on a lot of nonprofit boards.
Yeah, if they get state money. Yeah.
And so what they're doing is looking from the list, right? As
Yeah.
A former director of a nonprofit. And if your product is this much higher than this product, and I can't afford this product, I may take this product, but I have to try to work with you first. And that's very important for your business, for our businesses, right? So you're not guaranteed the bid because it's in WMBE, but there is a requirement in all state contracts to try and show, you have to show how you've tried, right? To meet that 30%. And that could be for like a nonprofit as big as this, diversified programming. We might be looking at ordering all of our paper supplies or our POS systems from someone, a WMB owned business, or we may be actually Amy's looking for vendors, right? All of our stores at Taste New York are looking for vendors that are certified, and we have a lot of diverse businesses, but getting people that are certified is really, really difficult. So that's why these importance are so important.
It really is.
And in terms of being able to go onto these links, like the New York State Contract Reporter, the municipality sites, the bid, I'm just curious how that looks. It's gonna give the description of exactly the product or service they're looking for, but can you also see what the organization is, whether it's nonprofit or otherwise? Do you get those details in the bid of who specifically is looking for it?
Yeah, you do. So most of the time it'll be an authority of New York State somewhere, like OCFS, the Office of Family and Children Services. One time I saw they had a bid for novelty, so they wanted coloring books and you know, blow up beach balls and stuff, right? Because they needed toys for when they had kids that were on transportation back and forth to visit their biological parents from foster care and stuff, right? So there's all different types of things that you would not think that the government buys that they actually buy. So the Department of Corrections, which I choose not to work with just because I don't do cops, but you know, that might be you and you decide that that's cool. The Sheriff's Department was looking for 2 Harleys during the pandemic, and like the Harley place is right across the street. So it's like, why don't they just go over there if they can? right? You can go price the Harleys and then send the sheriff's department a bid. The Department of Corrections, they literally buy Kool-Aid packets. They buy socks. Right, because if you know anybody who's been in the corrections department, there's a magazine that they can buy things from.
Right.
And you can actually, at a MWBE event, they might invite you to meet the person who's putting those supplies into that commissary book. Right, so sometimes the benefit of being MWBE certified is being invited to special contractor events, the MWBE forum, there was just one in Syracuse. They try to do it at 3 spots around the state, but you can also meet buyers there too as well.
And of course, they gave me the job of timekeeper and to move everything along. And so I love all these questions and I hope, Ebony, you're able to stay with us through the networking and lunch so we can continue to pick her brain. I know you're not done with her, I can tell already. But we do have some folks on with us from Zoom land. And Rivka Getchefu, say it again for me. Getachew is Director of New York New York Good Food Purchasing Program in New York City. She mobilizes and supports the New York City and New York State Good Food Purchasing Program across all of New York State. That is, let me tell you, a mouthful, and I don't know how you introduce yourself, but I'm in awe of you already. So the activities are related to advancing value-based food procurement in New York City, which is, by the way, very different from the rest of New York State. But Rivka utilizes food systems knowledge to protect threatened green spaces, to support the envisioning and building up of our local food infrastructures in New York City. And I know there's a few of you in the room who are really interested in this presentation for sure. Let's see, she also worked at the Center for NU Leadership at Urban Solutions, managing Human Justice Community Council, where she worked to harness community power as a way of informing and sparking policy transformation. And we just heard how New York State government is helping to transform policies as well. Taylor Payne, another presenter as the New York State Good Food Purchasing Program Campaign Manager, is responsible for building support around good food policy and coalition building throughout New York. And as you hear, our New York State partners are very interested in New York because where does the food for New York come from sometimes? The upstate region, and that's why our supply chain is so important. Through her years working as a procurement professional and policy advocate, Taylor has developed a strong interest in building resilient regional supply chains, especially those that are inclusive of Black and brown farmers. Taylor received a Master's of Science degree in Food Security and Development from the University of Reading in the UK, and a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies and Political Politics from Hendrix College. So welcome to both of our presenters. We're so happy to have you, although via Zoom. Nevertheless, you are in the room with us, and so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Would it be okay if I just shared my screen now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Are you able to see everything okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, yes, thank you for the introduction for Taylor and I. We are going to be sort of oscillating, facilitating through this discussion. So one, I just wanted to thank you for welcoming us into this space. We also really apologize. We had a flight to Syracuse and we were going to drive down to Binghamton last night. But, you know, because of the weather, our flight kept on getting delayed and delayed and delayed. So we weren't able to make it there in time, but we hope that this will suffice. We also asked that if there are any questions from the audience or from any of the other presenters, that maybe Precious could just help mirror them back to us, just because it was a little bit difficult to hear audience reflections. And that's one of the things that I know that we're missing from being there in person with you all, the opportunity to connect in person, especially during the the time outside of the actual panel presentation. We're going to have our contact information available at the end of the presentation, and we're happy to open this presentation up if folks are interested in looking through it more or getting more resources from us. So the communication channels are very much open despite us not being able to be there in person. I just wanted to quickly start us off by just sharing a little bit about the organization that Taylor and I work with. We work at an organization called Community Food Advocates. It's based here in New York City. Taylor and I are based in New York City ourselves, but our campaigns cover New York City and New York State. We have some New York City specific campaigns and some New York statewide campaigns. I would just say, like, in short, we exist at the nexus point of advocating for high impact food policy and the breadth and power of the amazing coalitions that we lead and work with. Our coalitions are really guided by solid policy and budget analysis and are really fueled by the full partnership and engagement of the people that are most directly affected by these issues. Some of the campaigns that folks primarily know us for historically are the Lunch for Learning campaign, which advocated for free universal school meals here in New York City. We currently co-spearhead the Healthy School Meals for All campaign across New York State to get universal free school meals across all New York State schools and all municipalities. But then the work that we're going to talk about, and then there are a number of other campaigns, but just to move us along, we also are going to be talking more specifically about the Good Food Purchasing Program campaign on the New York State and city level. Okay. All right. So we want to just do a quick poll to just get a sense from the audience as to how familiar folks are with the program, the Good Food Purchasing Program. So Precious, or if anybody else can just help us out maybe in talking a little bit louder. This might not work via Zoom, but we just wanted to do a pulse check. So how familiar are you all with the Good Food Purchasing Program? And then also, when you hear the phrase Good Food Purchasing or Good Food Purchasing Program, what comes to mind for you or your business or your communities?
I haven't heard of it.
There's a lot of shaking of heads, who haven't heard of
To me,
it.
it sounds like, locally sourced healthier food.
You have to
Local-
repeat that.
Yeah, it sounds like locally sourced.
Healthy
I would
food.
say the same. Yeah, I'd say the same. And I was also surprised in just looking through the papers that there's an emphasis on animal welfare. So I was surprised to see that in the descriptive. But
That's great. Yes, a lot of times when we ask this question, folks don't immediately go to the animal welfare provision. Thanks for lifting that up. Anything else coming up for folks?
Maybe being able to source, quality, foods, at reasonable prices.
Reasonable prices, quality food. Okay, that's great. Anything else coming up for folks before we go to the next slide?
I think maybe it might be a new introduction to try to change the average lunch meal for kids. And start getting them more want to be vegan and non-meat. Meals. I think that I actually have 3 kids of my own. I think it's very important.
One of the.
Give them a better, a better source, a more healthy source.
I actually agree. I mean, there's been so much effort, and a lot of it's coming from lobbyists, for animal products. I myself am not vegan, but I did have a restaurant with a strong vegan clientele. I actually sold it to a couple of guys, Strong Hearts. They're expanding all over. They're doing a great job. But there just seems to be this default in the food industry to our protein has to be animal sourced. And that comes with its own very specific set of issues. But I remember talking with someone once and they had, there was a lunch that had no meat on it. And they said, well, this isn't really a lunch simply because meat was omitted. But I mean, I'm really, really happy to see that on there. Animal welfare, and in fact, even though, again, I'm not vegan, the exclusion of animal products, it's not the necessity that lobbyists have told us that it is, without being too political here.
And was there someone else that was about to chime in after you before I jumped it back in? I just didn't want to talk over folks. Well, I was just going to express my gratitude to those comments. I feel like you all pretty much did our job for us by articulating what the Good Food Purchasing Program is. And I'll just also quickly say that what's interesting about the animal welfare provision, we'll get into the Good Food Purchasing Program in a few slides, but it also includes for institutions a less meat, better meat option. So in part, it also encourages that if institutions are not yet at the point where they're completely excluding, and it's not necessarily advocating for a complete exclusion of meat, but that if they are going to be purchasing meat, that they should buy less meat and then use those savings to also buy better meat options. But there are a number of strategies that inform the Good Food Purchasing Program, and I don't want to jump in too specifically, but we really appreciate that pulse check just because it helps to add more dimension to the conversation. All right. So I'll pass the baton over to Taylor.
Cool. Thanks, Rivka. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here with you all. We're going to get into talking about what the Good Food Purchasing Program is now. So the Good Food Purchasing Program, or as we often call it, GFPP, provides a metric-based framework that encourages large public institutions to direct their buying power to a set of 6 core values. And these public institutions, when we speak about public institutions, we're thinking of schools, hospitals, senior centers, jails, any publicly funded institution that's run by a municipality or a state government, or even the federal government. These standards are a scoring methodology and rating system by which there's an organization called the Center for Good Food Purchasing, and I'll talk more about soon, analyzes how institutional food purchasing aligns with a set of the good food purchasing values, which we'll talk more about soon. So the center, which I mentioned, and I'll talk more about in a moment, they work with institutions to establish supply chain transparency, evaluate how current purchasing practices within institutions align with the good food purchasing standards, assist with goal setting, measure progress, and celebrate institutional success in shifting towards a values-based procurement purchasing model. And when we speak about good food purchasing, we see this as what we call a values-based purchasing model. There could be many methods of institutions leaning towards a values-based model, but the Good Food Purchasing Program in particular is one that we are focusing on, and it's going to inform some policy that we're going to be talking about in the upcoming slides. So the Good Food Purchasing Program is the first procurement model in the country to support 6 food systems values, like I mentioned, all in equal measure. It transforms the way public institutions purchase food by creating a transparent, equitable food system built on these 6 values, which are local and community-based economies, animal welfare, environmental sustainability, community health and nutrition, valued workforce, and equity. I'll talk more about those values in a moment and kind of what each of those means and how they inform the program, but those are the 6 values that kind of underpin the Good Food Purchasing Program and the values upon which this kind of methodology and scoring system is based on. And so, the kind of central question and theme, what we're going to be thinking about today is how can responsible procurement within city and state agencies and values-based procurement in particular include MWBE businesses to build a more equitable food system? How can a program like this be implemented within our municipal level governments, within our state level agencies to really support MWBE businesses? And lastly, I'll just say before moving on to share more about the values, this program is managed in particular by what I mentioned earlier, which is the Center for Good Food Purchasing. And they are an organization based out in California. They contract with public institutions that are interested in having their supply chain data analyzed in order to evaluate how institutions are doing within their public food supply chains. And the center really leverages the power believes in leveraging the power of the public dollar to create an equitable and transparent food system that prioritizes equity in our public supply chains and the health and well-being of our people, animals, and the environment. So now we can move on to the value areas that I started to touch on earlier.
So, Taylor, I also thought that it might be helpful to just share with folks what public institutions are. And I'll just quickly say, because you've already, somebody in the audience already mentioned schools, which is a part of the list, the breadth of public institutions. Public institutions pretty much mean any public agency on the municipal level, on the state level, or like Taylor mentioned, on the federal level that uses public dollars to buy foods. So that could include schools, hospitals, jails, and other carceral facilities, senior centers, homeless shelters, community-based centers. So we just wanted to give that quick little snapshot in terms of who we're talking about here as the buyers of this food.
Cool. Great. So when we're thinking about good food purchasing and how this fits into our, public institutional supply chains, we're looking at this purchasing through these 6 different values, and this is kind of the lens by which we're evaluating how well an institution is doing in terms of the good food purchasing program. So if we think about local and community-based economies, it really means seeking to support local, diverse, family, and cooperative-owned food businesses to improve economic resiliency and community prosperity. So this includes New York State businesses. So really trying to support farmers and businesses, producers within New York State specifically, and obviously those close within the region. When thinking about environmental sustainability, kind of as a broad summary, it means sourcing from producers using sustainable practices and reducing carbon impacts of food purchasing to ensure that food production protects our ecosystems for current and future generations. There is a pretty long definition, a pretty detailed definition for how a supplier might adhere to the environmental sustainability metric. I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but we're happy to share more details about that if someone is perhaps curious. But the Center for Good Food Purchasing has, I'll just say, developed kind of a manual of sorts that really lays out the different metrics as part of each of these value areas, that gives a kind of a really detailed overview of what it means to meet these criteria. And environmental sustainability is one that does have, quite a standard. Valued workforce means ensuring that food suppliers respect farm workers' rights to freedom of association and to bargain collectively for better wages and working conditions so that food chain workers can live and work with dignity. Then we have the animal welfare piece, which we heard folks mentioning earlier, which means purchasing from producers that provide higher welfare conditions for farm animals and reducing the total number of animal products sourced to reduce the overall numbers of the animal foods in the food system. So this doesn't mean eliminating food from public institutional food supply chains, but just reducing the volume of animal purchases. And when purchasing from farms that are raising animals, it's kind of higher quality, higher welfare conditions. And then finally, we have the community health and nutrition, which means prioritizing culturally relevant, high quality and nutritious food that promotes health equity. Again, the nutrition component, there's a lot to it, and we're just giving a quick summary since we have a shorter period of time, but happy to really provide more details about what these values mean and kind of the metrics for each of them if folks are curious. I'm going to pass it. There's one more value here that I haven't mentioned that we're going to go into detail in the next slide because it's really related to the work that we're doing here, talking about MWBEs, and I'll pass it over to Rivka.
Thanks, Taylor. So like Taylor mentioned, we wanted to just pull out, highlight, and focus in on this value category, the equity, accountability, and transparency category. So I'm gonna actually, before I go to that slide, I just want to sort of set the stage for what you're going to see on the next slide. So we work at a nonprofit, like we mentioned earlier, called Community Food Advocates, and we lead a campaign in New York City and across New York State that on one hand is working on passing legislation to codify and make possible for suppliers like many of you all, make it possible for you all to get into the door for institutions, for those of you who are interested in working with public institutions. institutions. And we also work with local government and our mayor's office here in New York City and municipalities across the state and the public agencies themselves to help them troubleshoot, provide any sort of like strategizing support and collaboration to ensure that they're implementing and maximizing the good food purchasing program. So what you're going to see on the next slide are the requirements and provisions that a public institution, when they're opting into and beginning the implementation process of working within the GFPP or good food purchasing framework, these are the sort of provisions that they have to consider. I'll just highlight that it is also a very iterative process in that once an institution or a municipality agrees to working with the Center for Good Food Purchasing and with us, for example, or their local GFPP coalition, and establish that they want to institutionalize the program into their food procurement processes, they get a ton of support. They first turn over their procurement line item data to the Center for Good Food Purchasing. They have a massive team of data analysts that essentially provide annual reports that the institution, coalition, the Center for Good Food Purchasing would then use to set the strategies and goals for improving progress within the program for the following year. And then it's a process that builds on itself, and no one institution is expected to change their food procurement practices overnight. We know that this takes time and that this has the ability to collectively, when we collectivize our impact on the local level, has the ability to make tremendous strides in our food system. So what you'll see are the specific requirements that are in this category, in this value category, which is the equity, accountability, and transparency. So I'll just quickly say that equity, accountability, and transparency means centering food system transformation on investment and justice for BIPOC producers and communities. And also we're going to talk about gender bias and gender discrimination in a few slides, or a few or so slides. And we want to make sure that that value is considered here too. And we want to do this to work towards the end of ensuring that institutions can be accountable to their commitments and that they build authentic engagement with communities that are being served to ensure that impacted communities are engaged in the procurement decision-making process. So in just looking at these requirements for performance in the program, firstly, as you see, we want to make sure that institutions are sharing their purchasing data, any of those data assessments that I mentioned, the targets that they're looking to reach, and any implementation plans which they're expected to create as part of their commitment to the Good Food Purchasing Program. And we want to make sure that they do this in a publicly accessible location. I'm sure everyone knows here, it's very hard to get supply chain data. And without supply chain data, and I mean that from the perspective of the communities that are being served by these institutions, and also for the institutions themselves, it's very hard to know how and what methods to use to actually improve progress within the Good Food Purchasing Program and just improve progress, and get better suppliers in the supply chain period. So this particular bullet speaks to ensuring that transparency facilitates those goals and facilitates deeper engagement so that all parts of our food system, from the supply side to the folks who are consuming the food and the institutions themselves, can be thoroughly engaged with sufficient data to make decisions. We also want to make sure that institutions are actually engaging with community members throughout this process. This includes people that are actually the beneficiaries of food, the folks who are working in these institutions, so food service workers, and of course, local food businesses like you all represent. We want to make sure that this is a robust process, and when an institution agrees to committing themselves to the Good Food Purchasing Program, this is part of what they're agreeing to, that this process of engaging community members also is working towards the end of informing their decisions and their processes in terms of what sort of suppliers they're prioritizing and who they work with. Another provision here is that that an institution would develop a supplier or a vendor diversification plan, which includes goals that include reporting and accountability measures. We want to make sure that this data is also really robust and ensures that there's specificity within the data, including breakdowns by race and gender, for example. So, of course, you know, like we were speaking about, we want to make sure that institutions develop this plan from the lens of implementing the Good Food Purchasing Program to work towards the goal of prioritizing purchases and addressing barriers to entry for suppliers, like has been talked about in this panel, that have experienced negative systemic, social, and economic impacts across not just the supply chain and food purchasing, but through life. And then lastly, I'll just say that policies should also inform and should complement these processes. We're going to talk in a few slides about policies on the state level that we are actively working on right now to reduce some of these limitations, and that include an MWBE provision and that complement the MWBE program on the state level. But we want to make sure that even on the hyper-local level, that comprehensive institutional policies that and this is a particular importance here, that these policies that we're advocating for are also reflective of the needs of the communities that are being served and their values, and that center and prioritize transparency, racial equity, local economies, environmental sustainability, valued workforce, animal welfare, and community health and nutrition within their operations, within their food procurement policies and practices. And we can talk a little bit more about that in the event that folks are interested in diving a little bit more in. So I'm going to just quickly give a snapshot on New York City. We have an active New York City Good Food Purchasing campaign that we've been leading and spearheading since 2016 into 2017 or so. We have here in New York City 11 public institutions, including our schools, like was mentioned earlier, that collectively spend about $300 million on food annually and serve about 230 million meals also annually. We partner with the Mayor's Office of Food Policy and also those respective agencies and institutions to support and to complement and guide the GFPP implementation processes. So this includes things, for example, like support with identifying labor violators that are in our supply chain and creating mechanisms by which the Mayor's Office can remove or should remove those violators from our supply chain. I wanted to just quickly share this part about the policy that we've been looking to, that we got introduced back in 2019, because that'll set the stage for what we'll be talking about a little bit later on the New York State level. We knew that we were super excited about the fact that the mayor's office seemingly wasn't very invested in the Good Food Purchasing Program and still has been to this day. We also know that theoretically, if we have a turnover in leadership, that commitment can go away, can just vanish. And so we wanted to make sure that the city codified its commitment to the Good Food Purchasing Program. And therefore, we introduced with the Speaker of the City Council a Good Food Purchasing Program bill in 2019. We worked on crafting and then strengthening this bill language but we were met with significant restrictions from New York State procurement law. New York State has some of the most restrictive procurement law in the country. As you know, as I'm sure everyone here knows, New York State law requires that municipal level agencies select the lowest, what's called the lowest responsible bidder. And this is according to a specific provision within law, the New York State General Municipal Law, or what we call GMU 103. And so we realized that we needed to do something about this. And so these experiences on the local level illuminated the need for broader change. We'll talk about this in a slide or two, but we worked with our partners in Buffalo because there's also an active good food purchasing campaign in Buffalo to sort of create the foundation for what then became a really robust New York statewide GFPP coalition that was launched last year. But before we get to that, just in keeping on New York City, I just wanted to share some very quick stats that quantify how New York City used its early commitment to the Good Food Purchasing Program to increase the city's spend on minority and women-owned business enterprises. So, like I mentioned earlier, the city began, or maybe I didn't mention this year, but New York City began implementing the Good Food Purchasing Program in 2018, and that's when they started to do that data collection and data assessment. And so the first sort of snapshot that we have is 2019. And so in 2019, the city, across its 11 food serving public institutions or agencies, spent less than 1% on MWBE businesses. Now, I mentioned earlier, we're spending about $300 million on food a year. Around that time, I think we were spending about $500 million. So 0.08% of that figure of any number is just too low. And that marks the beginning of the city's implementation of GFPP. Now, there's still a lot of improvement. Let me just preface this next bullet by saying that there's still a lot of improvement that needs to happen. But like I did mention earlier, this unfortunately doesn't change overnight. We oftentimes wish that we could just snap our fingers and we radically improve our food system. But just looking at the years since 2019 and fast forwarding to 2022, which is the latest food spend data that we currently have in New York City, the city has now increased its MWBE food spend to a little over 5%. So that's essentially a jump from 0 to 5%, to be frank. So if anyone is interested in actually getting the more up-to-date data, which will be fiscal year 2023, let me know at the end of the panel, or our contact information is going to be at the end of this slideshow, or maybe Precious can share it. But that data is going to be coming out in about a month or so, and I'm happy to circulate that to anybody who's interested. I'm waiting tooth and nail for that data because I'm very curious about how the numbers have changed myself. All right, I'll pass it over to you, Taylor.
Great. So as Rivka mentioned, our work in New York City with the City Council and working to try to pass local level legislation highlighted a critical issue the municipalities across the state have been dealing with when it comes to procurement, which I'll talk more about soon. In New York City, we got significant buy-in from local agencies to implement the Good Food Purchasing Program, and we were super thrilled about this. But as Rivka mentioned, we knew it was going to be important for us to adopt legislation to ensure the longevity of the program. And after getting the New York City bill introduced, we remained working with the City Council to strengthen this bill language, but came up against a pretty critical issue, which is that, we learned in this process that New York State has some of the most restrictive and archaic procurement law in the country. As many of you know, through your own experiences working with in institutional procurement with local agencies, bidders, essentially an agency is required to go with what is known as the lowest responsible bidder. And this obviously includes food purchasing as well. And so we knew that if we were going to try to pass something on the local level in New York City, we had to really attack this municipal level law, which is General Municipal Law 103, which impacts all municipal level agencies. And so this led to a partnership with Senator Michelle Hinchy and Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes in the New York State Legislature to develop what we call the Good Food New York bill, which would impact all municipal level agencies when it comes to purchasing. And we'll talk more in the next slide about exactly what that bill means and what it would mean for all of you. In addition to creating a bill to address the restrictive nature of New York State procurement law, which we'll, as I mentioned, we'll share more about soon, we formed a New York State GFPP coalition. So we've, as Rivka mentioned, have had a robust New York City coalition and obviously have partners in Buffalo that have been working on good food purchasing there, but decided to really galvanize food systems actors across the state because we knew that we were going to need a lot of support and a lot of momentum in order to get this passed at the municipal level and ultimately to see this through when it comes to implementation. So we formed a coalition last October, and right now there are about 35, 36 individuals and organizations in our coalition. It consists of food systems actors from across the state, from farmers to farm workers to animal welfare advocates. Through our work, we collectively advocate for stronger legislation and are ultimately working towards bill passage. We also have a number of working groups, which include our institutional outreach and implementation working group and a farmers and producers working group. I think in particular, these groups are great resources for folks like you all, because we're actively trying to build partnerships with municipal institutions across the state in order to encourage them to implement values-based procurement. And additionally, we're also working to identify barriers that farmers face in order to better ensure that they'll be able to participate in the institutional marketplace. So I'm happy to, I know because of time, we don't have tons of time to talk more about our coalition and kind of the level of depth and breadth that these working groups cover. But if anyone is interested in learning more about the coalition and being involved and learning about how these working groups kind of impact your own kind of interest in working with municipal level agencies when it comes to responding to food related bids, I'm happy to have that conversation. And as Rivka mentioned, we will have our contact info at the end. So now I'll pass it over to Rivka. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm continuing. So yeah, the next slide, we'll talk more about what the bill actually does. So as we mentioned, it amends General Municipal Law 103. And it would basically allow for a bid to be awarded to a qualified vendor who fulfills one or more of the values-based minimum criteria. And these are the criteria that we spoke about when we were mentioning the Good Food Purchasing Program earlier. And so if a bidder meets one or more of these criteria, then an agency is able to, rather than just have to assign the bid to the lowest responsible bidder, they're able to give a bid to a bidder that meets one or more of these criteria, so long as the cost of the bid is no more than 10% greater than the costs of the lowest responsible bidder. So you can kind of read through that text there because I know it's kind of wordy and there's a lot there, but essentially an agency is allowed to give a bid to a bidder if it's not more than 10% more expensive than the lowest responsible bidder if they meet one or more of these values criteria. If anyone has any questions or as I'm going through this, feel free, I guess, to raise your hand or whatnot, and I'm happy to stop and respond. In addition, one of the really interesting and important components of this bill is a transparency provision that we have added in the bill. And so all bidders, regardless of whether or not you were to win a contract, will be required to include their bid, relevant supply chain information, which includes the name, addresses, et cetera, of the producer, supplier, distributors that are involved in the provision process. And through this providing this transparency data, this is how agencies are going to be able to evaluate, whether or not a bidder is meeting this criteria. And additionally, this data is going to be made publicly available. So either through an agency website or another mechanism, this data will be available so that, for example, businesses like you all can go to look to see who agencies are purchasing from, what types of products that they're receiving in order to make better, maybe potential decisions about your own, application processes. So this is super exciting because this is really, we think, an opportunity not only for, businesses to be able to learn more about how agencies are purchasing and who they're purchasing with, but also for community members to really know what's happening in terms of their food system and their supply chains and exactly where the food that's coming from within their schools, within these hospitals, and et cetera like that. And last thing I'll mention before we move on about, why is this bill so critical? Why does this matter? Is that this really is, I think as Colleen mentioned, an incentive for MWBE businesses. This is a mechanism that really allows MWBE businesses to get ahead of the curve and to be able to win contracts that otherwise may not have been possible due to the restrictive nature of General Municipal Law 103. So we really think that this is going to provide an opportunity and a platform for MWBE businesses to be more competitive and to really get access to some of those contracts that they may not have been able to in the past due to the nature of GMU 103. So now I'll pass it over to Rivka.
Thanks, Taylor. Does anyone have any questions before we jump in about the bill? Or we can also take questions at the end, if that's better. Okay.
No.
All right. Was that you, Precious? Were you saying no? There are none?
no questions.
Okay, great. We just wanted to quickly talk about why this even matters and why this is even important. So I'll just start by saying that the purpose of the Good Food and Why Bill, and honestly more broadly the Good Food Purchasing Program itself, is at its core to build stronger regional supply chains that ensure that our public dollars are being used to support the suppliers that represent the values of our communities. The goals, like we write here, are twofold. If we were to just sort of simplify what the Good Food Purchasing Program's values are, or what its goals are, what it's working towards, and how the Good Food and Why Bill will work towards that, we would essentially say this, that on one hand, we want to encourage that larger food businesses and food corporations are actually being held more accountable to utilize more ethical practices and to uphold the value categories that we mentioned earlier in their business practices. On the other hand, and honestly, perhaps maybe even more importantly, we want to also ensure that we're simultaneously creating pathways for small producers and vendors that would work with our institutions to be given opportunities to be awarded in institutional contracts. So we're talking about BIPOC producers, for example, and other socially disadvantaged farmers and food businesses. And I'll pass it back to Taylor.
Great. So as you know, we've been talking through this. One of the pieces that is so critical part of our bill is really the racial equity component. We see this bill as one that is confronting the legacy of racial injustice and inequities in the food system using our public food purchasing power. We're really giving agencies the power to be able to purchase in alignment with the values of their community and to provide opportunities to farmers, distributors, who have largely been kind of pushed out and haven't been able to access these contracts due to a number of reasons. So this bill aims to address this, and in part by giving preferences to minority and women-owned business enterprises. There is language specifically within the bill that preferences MWBEs. And so if you are certified as an MWBE, you would have a leg up as a preference vendor if you meet the value-based criteria that are laid out in the bill.
I guess taking myself off mute would help. We also wanted to just give some perspective and censor perspective around gender justice and equity in the food system. So just for some quick perspective, here in New York, women own or co-own about 37% of New York farmland, which is the equivalent to about 2.6 million acres. That number year after year is also growing as more women become decision makers in agriculture. To just put this into a nationwide perspective, across the United States, women own about 43% of farmland, which is about 388 acres. And we also know that more than 50% of beginning farmers, more than 50% of beginning farmers across New York State, just to bring us back home, identify as women. So that's about, about a little over 50%. So unfortunately, though, just to be real, this is also severely contrasted by the fact that there's a significant pay disparity, which has been persisting. Women-owned operations, for example, only earn $1 to every $2.50 that are owned by men-owned operations. This is due in part to the size and the type of farm operations that are typically run by women, as well as risk aversion and inaccessibility to support programs and networks. For example, we know that statistically, women-led farms are oftentimes smaller and have, while not exclusively, but historically tended to focus on items like poultry, horses, vegetable, flowers, or fruits. And these types of farms are not as profitable and oftentimes earn less than cash crops, for example, and dairy operations as just another example. We've also learned, and I can provide, actually on our resources slide on the end, you'll see the report that just came out, I think the last week or so, that provided this up-to-date data. But we've also learned that women are less likely to take on, historically, to take on debt and risky financial bets in order to expand their operations. This is talking systemically. This is not like a blanket statement. They've also faced, which is a major systemic issue, they've also faced historic discrimination from lenders that have limited their ability to take on loans and access land and equipment. I just wanted to give a shout out to American Farmland Trust. I'm sure many of you have heard of them, perhaps, or interacted with them. They have a program called Women for the Land, which aims to close the gaps for women, gaps of women that they, so that ultimately remain underrepresented in the utilization of USDA and state-based conservation programs, despite the presence that we just mentioned a couple stats ago in land ownership opportunities and positions. This organization, American Farmland Trust, also recently spearheaded and launched a coalition called the New York Women in Agriculture Coalition, where they convene women farmers, women land-owned farmers, and women farmers, landowners, and service providers to address these identified disparities and barriers that are facing women in the agricultural sector and in the food system.
Great. We wanted to quickly just mention our coalition members and the work that they do. And one organization in particular called Black Farmers United. They're an organizational member of the New York State Good Food Purchasing Program Coalition, and it's a group of over 100 Black farmers, educators, and food justice advocates across New York State. They developed a set of 9 solutions to address racial equity in New York State agriculture, and these solutions overlap directly with the work that we're doing through the Good Food New York bill, so it was something that we wanted to bring here. I know we're running out of time here, so I won't cover all of these solutions, but I think this was something that if folks are curious to learn more about Black Farmers United and the policy work that they're doing and how it overlaps with the Good Food New York bill, and ultimately how it impacts Black farmers, if any of you all are Black farmers in the audience or know Black farmers, and how this and are curious, would love to share more information about the BFU 9 solution. So happy to provide a link and more information so that you all can learn more.
I'll also be very quick. I'll just say that the Good Food Purchasing Program is being implemented in about 63 public institutions across 25 different cities across the country. And that's from the Bay Area to Boston and from Austin to the Twin Cities. Like I mentioned earlier, New York City and Buffalo are the 2 cities in New York State that are engaged on the Good Food Purchasing Program. And we really, really want to make sure that we increase that number. And that's one of the goals of the New York State Good Food Purchasing Program Coalition. So I just want to make a quick plug for that if there are any folks who are interested in exploring what it takes to implement GFPP or the Good Food Purchasing Program in your respective city, please feel free to reach out to us. We can talk with you. We can connect you with partners at the Center for Good Food Purchasing, and so on. I just wanted to give a 30-second highlight here to look at how another city that's been engaged on the Good Food Purchasing Program has used the Good Food Purchasing Program to amplify MWBE programs. So an MWBE success story within the Chicago Good Food Purchasing Program really highlights the Phoenix Bean Tofu Company. Taylor and I got an opportunity to go to, back in December, the Chicago Food Policy Action Council's buyer-supplier mixer, where the Phoenix Bean Tofu Company actually had some products that they were showing, and that they were offering samples for to not only community members, but also to institutions across New York State. I'm sorry, across Illinois and Chicago that were coming in to buy new products from new suppliers that met these values that we'd mentioned. So in the case of Chicago here with this particular company, the food service management company at the Chicago public school system works also with the Chicago Good Food Purchasing Program Coalition, asked the coalition if they had a local tofu product that had less packaging or labor tied to processing it. And we wanted to just amplify this because what's also unique about this business is that they were not only able to meet the mark on the MWBE program side, but they were also able to increase their score, the institution's score in the nutrition category, in the animal welfare category, vis-a-vis the less meat option. They identified as they're a local business within the equity value category, and they offered sustainable food products. So they were able to sort of check the box across a number of different value categories. So I just wanted to lift that up because there's a lot of intersectionality within the Good Food Purchasing Program, and that's one technique that I think a lot of MWBEs across the board have been able to provide in terms of to use the phrase of a sort of value add to an institution and a community.
Great. So thank you all for having us today. It's been